I don't know if this is gonna be any better. We'll find out. All right, Marilyn and Hody, what's the word? My preview is fuzzy, so I don't know. I can't see if it's better or if it's worse or what's going on. Oh, apparently everybody. I just got a message that said it was fixed, but I wasn't seeing everybody's messages. But anyways, now it's maybe super fixed. But now give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna share this link on Instagram. Oopsies. That's just a mess. Whoopsies. I don't have to hear myself. That's just a mess. Whoopsies. I don't have to hear myself. Gonna make a number 2 for take 2. That was really weird. I wonder why it was like that. My computer just had a giant hiccup. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. Swipe up for new link. If you ever want to know how to look unprofessional on YouTube, boom. Let's add this new link. How about yep. There we go. That link is posted. We only got 3 people in here. We lost the other 11. Our go. Or people wouldn't still be on the other one because it closed. Oops. The good thing about all of that is, well, my tea is now the perfect temperature for drinking. So that's a bonus, I guess. Look for the silver lining. What happened? It was, I don't know if my computer was just swallowed something and went down the wrong tube and was having a hiccup, or if my internet was having a hiccup, or what it was, but everything was just sort of imploding. At the end, though, I think it was working smooth, but I had lost the chat. I couldn't see you guys, and I couldn't get the chat back. So, no, I mean, my computer's really strong. I edit high definition video on it basically all day long. I think it just had a hiccup. I honestly don't know. But a new computer wouldn't solve the problem. My computer's plenty fast enough. Well, and I mean, I've been doing this for 20 weeks and it hasn't been a problem, so that wasn't the issue. I don't know what the problem was. Could have also just been the internet. I'm not honestly sure. Just a weird freak accident. Hopefully freak accident. Who knows? My computer could potentially use some tea, that's true. All right, where were we? I wish there was a way to just have the live chat and the whole live in general just be on Discord, that would be great. But not a lot of active users on Discord these days. I feel like I have conversations with one or two people, and that's about it these days, which is fine. I haven't been putting a lot of content and stuff up there, so it's good now. That's good. We lost a lot of people in that madness, but that's okay. Life happens, Marilyn, no sweat. Alright, what were we doing? We were testing out this nib to make sure it was going to be okay for a session of writing. And this is definitely going to be what I would call a training nib, because it is very, very snappable. So it's wanting to snap every moment. So I don't know, we'll see. I'll write with it for a while, and then I may have to change it out to something else. Oh, yep. We'll see. I want to keep using it just because I'm too lazy to change nibs. And when it's good, it's giving a decent hairline. It's just that upstroke is a little jaggedy. So we're going to do what we always do. Check it out. Right, Hody, let me check out this nib, and we will dive into your modern to traditional grip turmoil that's happening. Oh no, that was just for a sec. I thought one of the tines was straight up like broken and was shorter than the other one, but I think there was just a fiber on the one tine that made it look longer. So you're not alone, Hody, in your issues with the modern grip. But one of the things that people say quite often is that the modern grip hurts, and the modern grip is a more natural sitting position than a traditional grip is a more natural sitting position for the arm than a modern grip. When we rest on a table, I would assume most people would be more likely to rest like this than they would to rest. Nobody rests on the side of it. Maybe they do, but this feels comfortable, like you're just lying down. So basically, from there, the only muscles that are working are your arm muscles to pick your hand up off of the table, and then you're just putting a nib in your hand. There's no extra anything that has to happen, no extra weird wrist tweaking or stuff like that. So that's really what I think is happening. Give me one sec here. I'll zoom out for you guys. There we go. I got a new lens for my camera so I can get some better shots. So, yeah, so what I was saying, like sitting, everybody's used to writing this way and used to gripping the pen and stuff like that. So this is the way most people's hands look most of the time. Now what happens is when people go to a traditional grip, if you keep your hands exactly like this and you rotate the forearm, then my thumb is way underneath. And I feel, and I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like a lot of people, when they try to go to a traditional grip, they keep their exact way, because it's a habit that they've done or that they've had since they were kids of holding the pen. They keep that the exact same. So then when they turn, they get this, which this isn't far from a traditional grip, but they can end up trying to rotate too much, or they'll kink their wrist to get the angle right. Because as I've mentioned in many times in my lives, when we go from traditional to modern, you'll notice the angle of the nib changes. So if we're used to writing like this, if this is the angle that we're expecting to write at with that nib, sorry that it's dark with the dark paper, but if that's the angle we're expecting to write at, and we go to traditional, that points the nib at a different angle. So then we might end up doing this to try to get the nib right again, because the flange, the pen isn't set up for a traditional grip. So maybe that kink in the wrist is what some people do. I know other people kink this way. I personally know that when I have a bad habit, I sometimes end up kinking more to the right than I should. And it's just something that naturally happens, but it's a relaxed position for me now, so there's no tension or anything there. Now, when I looked at your pictures that you sent me, Hody, I didn't notice any real, there was no alarming red flag things that I saw. I unfortunately can't feel how your hand feels to you, but a traditional grip is literally just the hand is resting, 100% neutral, just chilling. And then we bring it up onto this forearm muscle, and we're just putting a pen in it. Now, a lot of the old pictures, like one of the most famous traditional grip images is the one of F.B. Courtney. And Courtney, unlike myself, Courtney wrote his thumb was very bent. So his thumb was at quite a sharp angle. I can't even bend my thumb really at the angle that he naturally did. And many penmen write with a grip that looks similar to that, sort of more so like this a little bit, which is still relaxed. He didn't have tension in there, but for me, this isn't a comfortable position. This feels tense, which is why I don't use the traditional grip the same way as Courtney's image or from his books, because it's just not comfortable. So my hand is literally in a neutral position, just resting on the table, and I put a pen in it. However the pen is comfortable. I don't try to force anything at all. Nothing is grabbing or pressing on anything. Everything is still as relaxed as it was before I put a pen in my hand, when it was just sitting. Your shoulders stop you from going full traditional because of... What does his shoulders have to do with it, Fozzie? Because if I go from modern to traditional, nothing changes in my shoulder. Nothing even really changes up here. It's just a wrist rotation. You go from here to here. What happens, their habit problems is when we then start doing things, like things don't work the same with a traditional grip as they do with a modern grip. So if you try to do the same things, you are weird, Fozzie. If you try to do the same things, they're not necessarily going to work. Or you're going to be creating excess tension. And there are a lot of really good penmen that write with knuckles that look like they're tense. There are a lot of, you can write with pretty much any grip. There are many different ways of writing. I have posted videos in the past of not having a pen at all, of just literally holding a nib in my fingers and writing with it. You can write any way. So I personally like people to try to explore natural ways of holding the pen based off of the imagery of the traditional grip. If you still find that super uncomfortable, like if it's painful, then I would say use sort of a modified modern grip if you can, or just a weightless modern grip. Again, there's many ornamental penmen that do really nice movement-based writing with a more modern grip. It's totally possible. A traditional grip is not at all by any means mandatory, and I genuinely feel like if anybody tells you that, to me they're wrong. They might want you to have one, but you don't need one. I really don't think you need one. I personally prefer it because I think it's built specifically, or it's geared specifically for the writing. similar to how the oblique holder is specifically designed for slanted writing, slanted shaded writing. So I think it's best to try to adapt to a traditional grip, but that's a personal choice. But the biggest thing, if it's causing you pain, it's not the traditional grip that's causing you pain. It's something you're doing trying to adhere to that specific traditional grip that is causing you pain. Because a traditional grip should be relaxed. I mean, even a modern grip should be relaxed as well. Oftentimes, like if we're doing engrosser script or slower writing, we need to grip the pen a little bit more because we're applying slower pressure for a longer period of time. So we have to grip a little bit more, but still that's less tension. Like my hands, I will say, my hands get more tired when I do engrosser script or copperplate because I'm not used to, or my hands aren't used to having extended pressure on the pen. So there are like certain amounts of tension in certain scripts are mandatory, but in ornamental penmanship, it's really just writing or doing drills and stuff shouldn't cause tension here. And there are most of the books that describe the traditional grip, like there's some days they would say that they would put like a coin on your wrist to see if it would fall off. And I don't remember what book it is, but there are multiple places where you'll read the hand is slightly rotated to the right, but not enough that a coin would fall off. Do I have a coin within? I don't. No coins. They're all. We're by my kitchen. But the hand can be slightly to the right, and that's how I write. My wrist isn't completely flat. I'm currently working on seeing if I benefit from trying to flatten it out more than I already have it. But that's just sort of an experiment. Tell you what, I'm gonna get a coin. I'll be right back. Stand by. Jar of coins. What do we got in here? Any coin will work, I guess. But I want to use a dime, just because I like dimes. Finally, my question gets solved. You're very welcome, Hody. This is also one of the awesome benefits of going to conventions and stuff like IAMPIT, is we sit in the study rooms, and it's much easier to get these answers in person. That's why I started doing the video with the second camera, so that there's a little bit more of demonstratable video stuff. But if you see here, I've never really done this with a coin. It feels just weird having a coin on there. But this would be more for you guys. Or you could, not too much. You can see my messy desk. So I'm a little bit farther from myself than I normally would be, but I want you guys to be able to see the coin. So this is completely flat. Now, I personally don't write with my wrist completely flat like this, but you totally could. So this is completely flat. I write, natural for me is about like this, which, as you can see, I don't know if you see the difference. You probably can in the face cam. It is tipped slightly. I don't know what angle that is. Maybe that's like a 25-degree angle, something. I don't know. It doesn't have to be specific. But the coin is still there, and I can do all my writing. The movement is going to cause the coin to fall off, not the sort of sliding. Like if I'm going slow, the coin's not going to fall off. If I'm doing fast stuff, the coin's going to fall off no matter what I'm doing if I'm doing fast movement, even if it's completely flat. I want a hard copy of Tamlin's book. The hard copy of Tamlin's book is sold in a lot of stores online. I think it's a great copy to have. The newer copy, I have the modern version before they printed it with the blue and the gold embossed cover. But I recommend having it. It's a good book to read. It rotates my shoulder, which isn't the best. Most rotate body. It's interesting that it rotates your shoulder. I'm trying to... Like, is your elbow getting farther away from you as this is rotating? Because really, it's just isolating, it's this. It's essentially doing this movement. Traditionally, or modern, we write like this. We're just doing this. Nothing, I mean, my bicep, you can see it working, but there's no rotation of my shoulder. Nothing up here is engaging or changing whatsoever, just the forearm. Oh yes, shipping. I guess that's a problem. Next time I see you in person, Fozzie, we're gonna do a shoulder assessment because I'm very curious. But I know some people, like Bailey Rivera, Antiquaria Bailey, for example, she's always said that sitting in a traditional grip hurts her. I don't remember if it's her wrist or her elbow, but she finds just sitting in this natural position painful. My theory is she's an artist and she's been a calligrapher a long time, and I'm wondering if that's because of how sort of trained her muscles and everything are to be this way, and all of us for that matter, so that when we do this, we're engaging muscles we're not used to engaging. So that's where fatigue and potential pain, but I think a lot of it is when we rotate our forearm, if we're like trying extra hard to rotate our forearm, there's tension sort of in these joints instead of just relaxing and just rotating the arm. All of us are built to do this, so there's really no good reason that we shouldn't be able to. In my opinion, anyways. Over $100. Yeah, that's not... Nope. The book is not worth that. Very, very few penmanship calligraphy books, I would say, are worth that. And the ones that are from the 1800s and are extremely rare. So maybe try to find somebody who has it or who can ship it. I'm trying to think who else who would stock it. Like, I'm certain for people who are close to Hong Kong, I know Kahlo probably stocks it. Maybe shipping from Hong Kong is cheaper, or there is... I wonder if Sanjana in India has copies to sell. There's a lot of people sell it, I think. So keep an eye out. There is most of the examples and plates from Tamblin's book were also in the Business Educator. I'd have to dive into my notes to tell you exactly where they are. I specifically didn't post or compile that one, or if I did, I didn't post it on my website because that material is sold. So I made the choice to not have it freely available on my website because somebody is selling it. All the other stuff that's on my website is not in any other books that you can buy anymore. But if you want to go fishing for that information, I could even potentially find... Where's my clipboard? Do I have it written in here? Let me check. If I look through if I can find them, my Business Educator notes, there's a lot of them. We can find... Where would it be? So many notes. Here we go. Do we have Tamblin? Did I not make a note of it? That's weird. I didn't. I think Mom Man knows where it is, if he's still in here. I'm not sure if he is, but you could ask him anyways. Because most of the plates from Tamblin's book were printed in the Business Educator. So They are out there for free. I just didn't want to compile them and offer them because that is also somebody's business that I don't want to mess with. Do you have a suggested book for OP? I do indeed. It is PZ Blozer's Lessons in Ornamental Penmanship. And also the Tamlin book, but it's tough to get now, so I would recommend PZ Blozer's Lesson in Ornamental Penmanship. And then also all of the lessons on my website. In my opinion, the information in the lessons in the archive page on my website, most of them are 10 to 12 pages or 10 to 12 lessons. All of the information, or the information in every one of those individual courses, is good enough to train. I wouldn't say that one, like, they're bad. I wouldn't have put them on my website if they're bad. But the information in those PDFs is as good as the information in any other books. It's just worded in a different way. I straight up almost went to just stir my tea with my stir stick instead of my ink. It's available in Russia. Cool. So if you can get shipping from Russia, yeah, the downside to PZ Blozer's book is he doesn't discuss like movement or speed. That's one of the cool things about Tamlin's book, is he gives very specific, like, do this lesson this fast, and things like that, which is, it can be handy if you're getting into movement writing and you want something to follow or a guideline. But I rarely, in my own practice, I don't really count downstrokes per minute or anything like that. I just do what I feels comfortable. And has movement. Oh, it's nib. I forgot. Okay, one more quick chance, nib. I'm gonna give you one more chance. I'm gonna try to really quickly. What time is it? Okay, it's down. I don't want to throw you away. I want to give you a chance. But you're making it very difficult. I mean, I won't throw you away, but I don't want to cast you away into the box. Or the tin of forgotten nibs. Oh, now you're not going to write at all? Okay. We're not friends anymore. You're on a timeout, nib. What's going on, Ashok? Welcome. You're here just in time. You missed out on all of my crazy connection issues I had earlier. We had to shut the feed down and start it back up again, and it was just a whole mess. Okay, this nib is going goodbye. Now, this is a tin of used nibs that I'm just randomly fishing through to pick out an old nib, which is normally what I do for white ink. See, that feels like it's still got some life in it. I don't feel like starting a new nib today. So we'll see. This hairline might be no good at all, or it might be amazing. We will know momentarily. Spanserian Scripted Ornamental Penmanship Volume 2. I think it's worth it. But I know there are some copies of it online that are crazy expensive. I don't know what its actual retail price is, or what it was. I don't honestly remember what I bought it for. but it's not a vintage book. It's not one that I would pay vintage book prices for. Ooh, that is crisp. And has nice push strokes. I can definitely feel it in my writing. I'm nervous because I've been writing with that scratchy nib for so long. My upstrokes are tentative because I'm used to them scratching or snapping today. Not bad though. He doesn't have a plan to reprint it. Well, that's unfortunate. That's probably a good gauge. I need to fix this part of my compound curve stroke. Has been bugging me. I'm trying to remember when I noticed it last week, but it's been bugging me, so that's what I think I'm going to work on today. Starting with figure 8 drills. I mean, 100 is a lot for a modern book. It is a book of just examples. There's not a lot of documentation really in it. I think the examples are great. But that being said, it's not a book that I don't think I spent a lot of money on it or for it when I first got it. Turn up the light a little bit. It's a little dark. There we go. Whoa! Didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Not midnight yet. Why is this scarcity in printing? I honestly don't know. Mike's choice. I mean, it's the way he did it the first printing. I know it was a very costly affair when he first released the book. So I don't know if that's why. Ooh, that's fun, Ashok. See, that's the best. That's the best way. I remember you saying that you would do. Yes, I need to do a YouTube video on nib sharpening. I apologize that I haven't done that yet. I will make one for YouTube eventually. I have a very long list of videos I need to make for this YouTube channel. And I just haven't. If I'm being honest, I was kind of waiting for my backdrop to be a little nicer, but I feel like the waiting has to end and I just have to start creating videos like I used to. These lives are fun because I don't really focus on the production value all that much. It just kind of is what it is. I put it out there. People like it, cool. If people watch it, cool. If they don't, cool. It doesn't really matter. But if I'm posting videos, then I put in more time editing and all that kind of stuff. So I want to make some Mike reminding YouTube Mike. That's good. IG mic and YouTube mic work on their own schedules. If volume 2 isn't going to be printed again, then I don't imagine it would be too long before it ends up in PDF version, potentially. I'm not going to scan it, but maybe Mike will release it in a PDF version if he's not planning on reprinting. Well, good night, Marilyn. Sleep well. Oh, apparently somebody has volume 2 scanned online. I think I saw it once, but I thought it was still for sale, so I didn't want to talk about it. Whoa. Smelly dog. What are you aiming for in the figure 8 drills? When I do these ones, it's really, I'm trying to smooth out in my S's that you can see here. I'll draw one. When I write them, I often get a, that's an exaggeration. But I get this, I get like a stutter thing in there. I think it's something to do with when I write figure 8s. The transition doesn't happen smooth from here to here. Here it's more like abrupt, like it goes ha, sharp, and then smooths out, I think. So I'm trying to smooth out that top, this shape of the S. So it's basically the trend going from this compound curve into the shade stroke. I get a good shade on that stroke when I do just the stem shade, like this. When I just do these ones, I'm drawing these, I'm not writing them quickly. But when I do that one, I get a decent shade and a decent shape. But when you do the S, like if this was an S, it would be here, and that's leaning too far. That's at too steep of an angle, so it has to be kind of up in this direction, which means you're coming at it from a more steeper, a more vertical transition. And when I get that more vertical transition, something about going into the compound curve from here down trips up, and I get this weird shape up there, and I don't like it. So I'm trying to smooth that out. It's one of the big things that I see that differentiates my writing from a lot of the old specimens is the smoothness of the tops of their capital S's and capital R's. And capital G's as well, I guess, even though they don't have a compound curve coming out of them. Yeah, the way they end up doing it, it looks very similar to like an ascended stroke. It's very smooth like that. Let's see, there's a perfect example of what happens for me. Cha-cha. I get that ugly, sort of abrupt turn there, and I don't like it. I would much prefer it be like so. So it's sort of a combination of two things. I need to smooth out the compound curve, which is what the figure 8 curve or stroke helps me do. And then it's also transitioning, not obviously in this instance because I came from the baseline, but when I do an entry oval horizontal, it's the transition from about here. I can't go up here smooth because I'll end up at that steep angle that we had over here. I need to transition more abruptly into my slant line to get the shape of the S. So it's about from here to here, this transition, and then smoothing out this compound curve coming down are the two strokes put together make up the one that I have trouble with. I'm gonna raise my chair just a little bit. Sorry, that was a lot of talking. I hope that made sense. I didn't know that online version was missing chapters 2 and 8. I was not aware of that part. Jeez. It's just always there. Doesn't make any sense. Why there's that crazy issue there. I don't think it happens when I use whole arm. If I do a test here. My arm. My arm feels like it's not into writing today. It's been doing drills, filming those videos for so long that now I feel like it's just like, no, I don't want to do anything. It doesn't feel like being disciplined. Ooh, this nib is really good. Why was it in the departed box? Some of those nibs in that box are like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. Woo! It's a good tea there. I could put a little shade on the top part. I feel like that the movement would still have that little dagger in it, or that little jagged shape. I feel like the chat is really behind me today. I don't know if it's because of the issue we're having, but I feel like the chat is a good few, more so than normal, behind my talking. Ojaswini, yeah, the class, we start with drills, and then we break down fundamentals, and then we do the letters by their similarity. We do them in groups with movement. So we do tackle each letter, but it's more so each letter group, because a lot of the letters in ornamental penmanship are based off of like forms. So once you learn one form or one movement, that same movement gets applied and put in a series of letters with basic or with little slight variations. How one can train themselves for a traditional grip. You just start using the traditional grip, basically, is the only real way that I would say to train yourself to use one. You just pick up the pen and you make yourself hold it in a traditional grip. And the hardest step is allowing yourself to not be good with the traditional grip. It's like learning something new. If you try to hold on to your perfect writing, and this is this class that's coming up in general, it's sort of the mantra of the whole class. If you hold on to how good you were before or your forms before the class started, you're not going to grow in the class. If you let go and you let yourself be terrible, then you will build up better. It's like a forest fire burning down an entire forest so that seeds can germinate and grow new. We all know in some rainforest or some forests in the world, the only way for certain seeds to germinate is by fire, apparently. So that's how we start. OP is too soon for me. Too soon? What do you mean too soon? One interesting thing, or one neat thing to remember about OP in general, ornamental penmanship in Spencerian, this was how 10, 12-year-olds were taught how to write back in the day. This was normal. I mean, not so much the artistic aspect of flourishing and whatnot, but the base forms, which is what we do in the classes anyways, that's how kids were taught. They weren't taught anything prior to that. They learned movement writing from the get-go. I am quite liking this nib. It was a good pick. Get some water. New class in January, so we're doing the one, I guess it starts this coming weekend. Or it starts this coming weekend. And then I do have something coming up for the new year, but I can't talk about it yet. And who knows when I'll do movement writing again. Stirstick. It makes you go crazy because you're trying to get them perfect. You're holding on to how good you can draw them, which is making it impossible for you to let go and embrace your movement. And if you don't let go and embrace your movement, you're never going to be able to, the forms and the movement are not going to look good. So then it's just going to be the bad from both sides. You got to let go of that perfection. You got to have the image up here so you know what you're trying to create, but then you have to let whatever you create be what you create and then build up from it. Critiquing yourself in a non-negative manner. There's a little bit too much self-deprecating criticism in the ornamental penmanship world at the moment, I believe. And I say that meaning when I go through people's Instagrams and I see what people are posting for ornamental penmanship on the internet, good examples, and the comments are like, oh, so out of practice, or this is no good, or oh, this is so good except for the T. There's not a single piece of traditional, I don't care how good it is, there's not a single piece of traditional perfect penmanship from any penman that I can't look at and tell you something that's bad. Literally not a single piece. The most famous letter, the Mataraz letter, has a horrible D in it that's completely off slant. There's no such thing as perfection. You gotta let that stuff go. You can critique and strive to be better, but the key is critiquing without the negative point. Yeah, critiquing for growth, not critiquing for noticing what's wrong, if that makes sense. Critiquing is seen or is way too negative. We have to be able to see what's not as good as it could be so we can fix it. But that doesn't mean we should be hard on ourselves for what's not as good as it could be. Because nothing is as good as it could be. If it was, this would be a font and I would just type it. That's the definition of working harder or working smarter, not harder. If I didn't want to have personal character and the human element in my writing, I wouldn't write. I could literally write each letter, scan them, make a font of it. It could be an adaptable font as well, and done. I would never have to write a thing again, and all of my writing would be perfect. Nobody wants that. That's boring. It's the writing that we like. It's no fun being hard on yourself for the writing you like. Just like it. And if you can like it and continue growing at it, even better. That's the best. That's what you want. That's what I talk about when I talk about falling in love with the process and stuff like that. That's what it's about. Negativity doesn't serve. I remember loving cursive class, or we learned it in English, I guess. Back when I was younger, nothing was quick, but we learned a more upright, more like, I guess, the Zahner Bloser American cursive handwriting, I think is more similar to what I learned. And I used to write it tiny. I wrote so small in school. It was basically like a contest to see if I could write my next project or next thing smaller than I did the first thing. I got in trouble once, I think it was in grade 4, for writing, I don't remember if it was a story or an would have been an essay in grade, was it 4? 4? Maybe grade 6. Can't remember. Anyways, I remember getting in trouble by my substitute teacher, Mr. Schermbrucker. My regular teacher, Madame Cornoyer, was out because she was having a baby. And I didn't like Mr. Schermbrucker, so to make his life difficult, such a horrible kid, to make his life difficult, I wrote as small as I possibly could. And he had a heck of a time grading my work because I wrote it extremely tiny. He did use a magnifying glass once. I think that was the last time, and then I think he and I had a chat, and I think he put an end to that, unfortunately. Basically, I got in trouble. Because that time, it was with malicious intent. I was writing it just to make his life difficult because I didn't like him. It wasn't fun. Why are you killing ants? What up, Devin? Welcome. Writing very close to the bottom of the screen all day today. I'm going to tweak my camera a little bit here. I feel like I'm writing very far away from myself, more so than I normally do. 2 seconds, everybody. Sorry. Oh, now my camera's in my... This lens is a different size than my other one. I think that's better. Is that better? It might be better. It might not be better. We'll find out. Maybe that's why my writing doesn't feel great. Oh! Finish the tea. Booyah. Ooh, sticking out too much. I know there's music playing, and I can hear it playing, the classical music, but I have, for some reason, the theme song from Jurassic Park is playing in my head today. Oh, I wish they still had penmanship classes. I would love to go to an actual school and teach kids a penmanship class. That would be so much fun. Because at first, it'd be neat. Because at first, the kids wouldn't want to learn it because they think penmanship is boring. But then I would do some crazy cool flourishing or something on the whiteboard or smartboard or whatever they use in schools these days. And the kids would be impressed. They'd be like, ooh, I want to learn how to do that. I didn't know penmanship was cool. And then, boom, penmanship's cool. New generation thinks penmanship's cool. Done. Plant those seeds. That's why maybe it doesn't need to be a regular class. Maybe they need to have like workshops. Just like how, I mean, I go into dance studios and I teach workshops. Maybe I need to do like, obviously more frequently if it's at an actual school, but like once a month. We have a penmanship class with Mr. Ward. And Mike comes in for the one day or like for that week, 1 week of the month, and works on penmanship with the kids. And they love it. And they look forward to penmanship week every month. They're so excited. I can't wait for penmanship week. I've been thinking about it all month. Penmanship week. We'll make shirts, everything. Whoa, okay. I'm at the bottom of the page. Your art teacher was ridiculous? My art teacher was dope. I'm pretty sure my art teacher was a big reason why I was so into art. She gave me a lot of freedom. I was basically allowed to sort of create sort of whatever I wanted, I guess. That was later though. That was like junior high school. Maybe like grade 7, 8, and 9 is when I started having a lot of fun in art class. With all sorts of different genres, biting off more than I could chew and having fun. Every time I clean my nib, I pull it out too far. Well, when you're learning specific techniques, I get that from from a teacher's standpoint. When you're trying to teach specific techniques and you have to like test them and things like that, it is easier to teach without the artistic element involved. Um, that's I think the difficult thing and what separates what were really dope art teachers versus people that are not seen as great art teachers is a dope art teacher can still teach without the artistic part, um, but make it fun. It has to be still fun. But you can't grade or you can't go straight to the artistic part, your artistic expression, because there's no such thing as bad art. I mean, it's all in the eye of the beholder, so it's impossible to teach that stuff. I don't know why I spaced it out like that. Kind of fun. Can I show the compound curve stroke once more, please? I'll show it even more than once more. How about that? I'm happy now. I'm writing a little bit closer to myself. I think because I was trying to stay in a good spot in the camera, I was a little bit too far away from out of my writing zone. Compound curve stroke. You're meaning this one? Ooh, not a very good example. That's better. It's kind of fun to space things out like that. I don't know why. That's a good choice. Fozzie? I remember my niece and nephews, or my nieces came to me. Um, Penmanship wasn't, or cursive wasn't in their curriculum. But their teacher at their school sort of took it upon herself to add it. So she made her own little packet so she could teach it. And the girls were so excited that their teacher had them doing cursive when it wasn't actually a part of their school curriculum. So they came and they liked showing me their writing back in the day. They don't anymore, which I guess they don't do cursive anymore. I'm not sure. I don't know why. My compound curve shades are not that rockin' today. Why? Why are they not good? They should be good. That's better. Too early. Better. Too long of an exit hole. You can't blame college for ruining your handwriting. There are people who go to college and do it all with good handwriting. We just grow habits. You can't blame other people for the habits you grow. You just gotta fix them yourself. I know that's not fun to hear. Okay, that's a little too spaced out, or too close together. This shade, about the halfway point. Like I'm starting at, some of these are starting kind of high. If I was writing on this paper, my capitals wouldn't go all the way to this line. They would start sort of like right here. So if I'm starting there, the halfway point, the half height of your capital is about approximately where you're starting your shade from. Same as, I mean, ideally, the shade should look almost the same, not exactly the same, but it basically looks the same, starting there, ending there, as a regular stem shade. Starting about the halfway point. I can even get closer. Closer. Oh, I can get super close. Super close. Get some focus action going. I guess that's not super close. Close-ish. So ideally, if I draw one, the way I'm doing this, I'm doing the starting the compound just nice and high. I want just a slight curve on the top just like a little bit, which is something I have issue with. I end up with too much curve on the top quite often. But I want a slight curve and then straight down. And then when I get just past sort of the halfway point, then the shade starts. The shade comes in here. And then the shade finishes as it's exiting. So it finishes like right there as it's coming off of the baseline to go into a nice horizontal exit oval that bisects the baseline. In theory, is approximately what I'm going for. Oh, feels weird being so zoomed in. I gotta be very cautious to make sure I stay in frame. The main thing I'm focusing on in my brain right now, obviously, ideally, I want everything to be perfect, but the main thing I'm trying to get consistent right now is this slight curve into the downstroke on the slant line. That is the thing that to me ends up being, it feels like it should be a really or relatively easy thing to fix, but I'm inconsistent with it. I can, when I'm in a good writing zone, my shades and my exit ovals kind of all follow very similar flow, but the starting point feels rocky. Or oftentimes, like you can kind of see it on this one, there's a slight, as I'm starting, I'm not super light. I'm starting pressing down a little bit more than I should, so I get almost, not a shade, but there's a slight accent at the tip, and I don't want that. I want it to start with the thinnest hairline, so it's coming down in a uniform hairline and isn't weighted at all on the top. So that's sort of where my focus is now. Transitioning, coming in, slight curve, and then this downstroke. And then, admittedly, right now, my exit or my shade and my exit oval are kind of on autopilot. I'm not super focusing on them that hard at the moment. Yikes, those are expensive prices. I personally think that's too much to pay. I don't think I wouldn't pay that much myself. I'm cheap though. Oh, I went off screen there, sorry. I forget that I'm so zoomed in. Beautiful hair. That's a lot of money. for that amount of money, Father, you could get your Monstera Deliciosa plant. 4 seconds. I guess so. I guess rhythm wise, if I were teaching this in the movement writing class, I would count it in 2. I wouldn't think of seconds, I guess. I would sort of go 1 count is my downstroke, this compound curve, and then the second count is the exit. It would be 1, 2, and 1, 2. So if I speak like I would be in the movement writing class, it would literally sound like this. We would go, and here we go. 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 1, 2. It might be a little quick. And 1, 2. Those forms. That's the speed I should be doing it at. 1, 2, and 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 that's how I would yeah, so the shade, I try not to. Sometimes it happens. I've been doing it a little more lately, but I don't like it. Changing speed once I'm writing. I like writing at one uniform speed as much as possible. So if I were doing this stroke without the shade, it would be, I guess, the slow point, anything that I'd be doing slow on this one, I'm starting a little bit slower than I would like to as I'm getting into the downstroke. I don't slow down through the shade at all, but because I have trouble with this little curve at the very top, I feel like I start a little bit slow into that one when I'm working really hard on it. But as far as shade speed, if I was going to write this monoline, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2. That flow is I want to maintain when I'm writing. I usually end up sort of accelerating through the shade if I change at all, just so that alleviates any like nib drag or anything like that you'll get at the end of your shade. Especially since this one, technically, when we're finishing the shade on the upstroke, if we think about the way the tines are actually working in the pen, ideally, like most of mine, some of them here, you can see the shade is ending as it's going up. Many of mine end on the baseline, but ideally I would like them to end slightly on the upstroke. And if we're doing that, we're shading down here. Once I'm going up, my tines are literally going like they're going up. So that's dig into the paper city, unless you have a light hand and have movement and force behind it, which is why my shade, I always have to remember, my shade is coming from my forearm, and when I focus on the shade part and the exit stroke, what makes a good one or a bad one for me is if I forget to the follow through, basically, just like throwing a basketball or hitting a golf ball. It's the same thing. Once I get down here, it's that my arm has to remember to go. That's my follow through. So as I'm coming out of the shade, I have enough speed that my tines aren't digging in at all. There's no scrape, there's no dragging ugliness there. It's just very smoothly as it's going from a shade to a hairline. Like dragging a car in a corner. Penmanship is just like race car driving. I don't know that I actually do accelerate. I know I say that, but a lot of people I think, have a tendency to slow down when they get into the thickest portion of the shade so they can control their exit trajectory. But when you do that, that's when, anytime you start to slow down, that's when your nib is going to start digging into the paper. And when you're mid-shade, that's where you have the most risk of the times digging into the paper. So for me, you gotta keep going. If you're on a bad trajectory, you gotta just own it and keep going through it, or you're gonna dig into your paper, or get jaggedy, not nice lines. You gotta keep that movement going. Obviously, it's impossible to get rid of all jaggedy lines. That's why we can see some of them in a lot of the old specimens, or you can sort of tell how things were written because of that. But you can alleviate a lot of the unnecessary ones by having that smooth motion and pull out of it, the follow through, as it were. Fozzie's in class. How to avoid accent shade on the downstroke? You just gotta train yourself to not apply any pressure at all. So if you're getting any shade on the downstroke, I would say take the shade out entirely and just do hairline versions. If you do a hairline version, you're gonna see exactly where you're applying weight that doesn't belong there. And don't keep doing them, because you do them all in one place. This is movement training. So I get used to this shape. But now if I'm doing hairline training, I need to be able to see each one. So I have to have each new one in its own space. And you shouldn't be getting any thicker points. When you're doing hairlines, you shouldn't even be getting thicker points where the shade normally goes. No accent shade, no anything, because you're specifically training to get a uniform monoline. Shades only go, and accent shades, everything, shades only go where you put them on purpose. They don't just end up places. The old penman and myself, sometimes when we're doing things, certain strokes get accent shades and we allow it because it looks cool, but that's only because it's allowed. If you don't want that to be an accent shade, you have the ability, or you should have the ability, to not shade at all. The shades are added over and above the clean hairline. So I would say if you're getting an accent shade where you don't want one, take it back to hairline until you do the whole stroke and you have no accent. Like I was saying, I sometimes get a little hot spot up at the top here because I'm applying pressure when my nib touches down. I'm trying to start on the move, so I'm technically starting this stroke. If my nib is touching down right here, I'm technically starting my movement around here. I don't like to do a big movement before I start, but I start moving and then I touch down and come down, right? So sometimes when I touch down, I'm a little too aggressive and I get a little bit of ink there. So I have to make sure that my touchdown is barely touching the paper, and then I maintain that pressure for the entire rest of the stroke until I want to add a shade. Then I choose where to put that shade. It's not a habit, and it's not because of my movement or anything. It's getting put where I want it to be. Putting the shade at the right place on purpose. Yeah, exactly. Well, because, I mean, if we do, let's say if I have this movement, this is going to be potentially a terrible example. I won't zoom out. I'll just keep an eye on the camera. We will, if I have this stroke that we've been doing in the hairline version, I can do it nice. I can do it clean. I'm getting consistent good hairline and consistent movement with the form. Consistent-ish movement with the form. Normally, we know where that shade goes. We place that shade down here. Right? That's normally where it goes. That's by choice. Technically, if I've done my work as much as I should, or if I've done my practice, and I haven't done as much as I should. This shape should be the exact same as this shape. One just happens to have a shade. But now, this is where the example is going to be a potentially bad example. This isn't a form that you should try to copy, but I just want to show in that, as Ashok counted 4 seconds, or how I time it, in those two beats, you can add the shade wherever you want. So I can keep that same movement, and I can do the stroke like this. This is going to be ridiculous, and I've never done this before, but we'll see how it turns out. I could do the shade like this. Boom. Same thing, but I put the shade on the top, right? That doesn't belong in any ornamental penmanship stroke or any ornamental penmanship letter, but you could do it. Or, another ridiculous example, I could start hairline, end hairline, and do it like that. My ending oval was way too small, but you get the idea that the shade only goes where you want it to go. Right? It can go on the exit oval. The shades are placed where we put them. So the most common thing that happens with this stroke, well, I mean, it happens to myself, but you see it most in people who started training in Grosso Script or Copperplate first, is you get that universal line of beauty, the compound curve shade, sort of starting out. If I draw one, you sort of get this happening a little too soon before you go into that shade, because that's what people are used to doing. We have to make sure that we don't start that shade till later. And we end that shade, personal preference, this shade can be ended right on the baseline, or I like the form where it's ended slightly off of the baseline. I'll try to do a good example of it. And the only way I can do it slightly off of the baseline is when it has that pushing momentum of my arm doing the follow through of that horizontal exit oval. So here we'll do one. I'll try to do specifically one starting a little too early and one we can technically start one too late. It's something that doesn't usually happen, but we technically could. So this one would be a movement example. It starts a little too early. So similar to the compound curve shape we had, we're getting there, we're ending right on the baseline. Oftentimes that same thing could happen, but the shade, because we know when we're writing, the shade has to be at the bottom. So we'll often get a shade that's really long, which is similar to what we end up with in Grosso Script or Copperplate. There, that's a decent example. It started a little high. It maintains its thickness sort of through this middle bit. It should be constantly tapering thicker and then narrower. It shouldn't maintain a thickness in the middle. Now I'm going to try to do one with a nice rounded bottom. I haven't been doing this stroke the best today, so it might take me a few tries to get what I deem a really good one, but I'll try. So that's not a giant shade, but you can see the shade doesn't end until we get to about here. It's off the baseline. It came down, started about the halfway point, even slightly lower than the halfway point, which I like. Oh yeah, I was going to show an example of starting way too low, which is not something you would rarely see because I feel like it's difficult. The shade has to happen really fast in order for that to happen, and it's really challenging. But let's say you shaded, like we could start this shade technically opposite of this. We could start it right here, potentially, and then end at the same point on the other side. So it's just shaded on the bottom of that horizontal oval. In theory, we'll see if I can do it or not. So super low shade. This feels weird. Let me try again. So that's sort of an example, and that looks really good. Like, it's starting much lower than the halfway point, but I think what I think makes it look good is how off of the baseline it's ending. It has this beautiful, I mean, the shape of the oval got a little wonkified at the end there, but because it's ending and it's so rounded on its way up, that taper looks so cool. Yeah, looks like a ladle, true. But, and this, I mean, I didn't start it as low as I was trying to. Like I said, it's hard to do, so it's not an issue. I don't think I've ever seen a student have that issue. If somebody came to me and that was their problem, that they always started too low, I would say, keep that, because that's way better than the opposite. Most people, 99.9% of people, myself included, start too high. So ideally for me, I would like to start a little higher than this, but this is how I want to end it. Shade is starting way before the center of the X height. Well, and if you think of, I wouldn't compare it to your X height, I guess, because, I mean, for ornamental penmanship, like the lowercase letter that's going to come after this is going to be like little. Like that I would consider that's a large lowercase letter for me. I write my lowercase letters quite small. And I wouldn't start my shade that high, and that's technically the X height. I would kind of go, it's sort of like where your T's and D's sit, maybe 2 times the X height, but what is normally said is about half the height of your letter form. That's where it starts, or slightly lower. Doesn't matter if the shade is thinner and just visible. Honestly, some of the most beautiful examples of penmanship, in my opinion, are lightly shaded. And this is something I've been wanting to do a full alphabet of lightly shaded capitals. I'm not that good at them because I've practiced shading big so many times. What's going on, Lori? There's no such thing as too late. You're here when you're here. I was just showing Ashok or explaining that the size of the shade doesn't matter. What's important in the piece, similar to with ornamental penmanship, spacing. Like it's different if you're doing traditional Spencerian or something like that. But with ornamental penmanship, it's your consistency. So if I'm gonna do, say this shade, and I'm gonna keep it really light in this line. If I'm just doing a lightly shaded compound curve stem, like that, like it's not much of a shade at all, then my other letters, if I had a capital B, for example, come after it, I wouldn't be shading my capital B like that, because those don't look good together, right? They don't match at all. I would do my capital B more like that, so they match, lightly shaded. There's some examples by, is it H.B. Lemon? Lehman. He's becoming one of my favorite penmen. I mean, all of the penmen, I guess, are my favorite, but I've really been enjoying seeing his pieces lately because, not all, but some of his stuff was super light shaded. Like the same thing, if I had a capital A that came in this alphabet, I wouldn't do my standard size shade, or what I go for when I do an A is sort of that. Like that I would consider a pretty nice A. That's what most of us, that's our target. But having this very beautiful, I don't want to call it dainty, but lightly shaded. Go farther so I'm not going through that oval. It's just it's a completely different look. So it's more so that the size of your shade matches the writing you're doing. There. Whoops, I totally did that off camera. Sorry. But that's the, like, I've been really digging the lightly shaded, and it's funny because you think, oh, that's way easier. Nope. In some aspects, like an A is way easier to do this A than the super heavy shaded A, but keeping that shade super consistent in all your capitals can be very difficult. When we shade really big, it's so easy, or it's much easier to just shade as big as you can. I'm going to write all the capitals and shade them all as big as I can. So they're all going to look the same. Unless some of them I didn't get my shades big enough, then I need to do those ones bigger. But I'm going to try to shade them all as big as I can. So we're not setting a limit. There's no cap to what we're going for. We're always doing the most. But if we're trying to write an alphabet based off of this A, for example, I can't just go for every letter. I have to control myself. It's like if you were to play an entire round of golf with a driver, or with an iron that goes way farther than you need. Like, you have to then control it in your swing. You have to pull that back. Which is much more difficult than just letting a rip with a club that's gonna go the distance you want. Right? I hope that analogy made sense. Yeah, as long as there's consistency in the shades and all the writing looks like it belongs together, that's what's important. It's much less about the size of the shade. It was a pride thing and a little bit of an ego thing among penmen who could get the biggest, cleanest shades, and I think that is transferred over to the way we think about it today. But like I said, I mean, I've tried to do the biggest shades I can for a lot of years, and I like writing that way. I think it looks awesome. But lately I've been really digging. I've been doing a lot of training on my own to control that, to be able to get nice consistency. Consistency is really the key in, ornamental penmanship in general. Spacing, there's no rule for what your spacing has to be for ornamental penmanship. Your letter spacing can be as wide or as close together as you want, so long as the piece is uniform. Same with shades. Your shades can be super light. You see this a lot. It's most apparent in the shading of the lowercase d's, lowercase t's, and p's, and f's, I guess. Because some penmen would really reef down and make really big ones where, like, that, you could go bigger than that, but that's probably just a standard shaded. But then there are other penmen that would do the exact same piece. Capitals could be shaded all whatever they are, but they are light shaders of the T's and the D's. So it makes the whole piece look completely different, but all they did was change the shading of all the D's and T's. You can't change just some of them. If you're going to do a light T, all the T's have to be light, or all the D's, they don't have to, but they should. It's going to look best if they're consistent. So consistency really is that's what makes or breaks ornamental penmanship, I think. That's a nice A. I'm quite proud of that A, I gotta say. What are those? It's not midnight. No. Okay, Google, turn on studio.
Sure. Turning 2 outlets on.
Come on. Silly. Apparently my outlets don't know that we had a time change. Oh, does that mean is my black light on too? Totally is. Okay, Google, turn off glow light.
Got it. Turning off the glow light.
That's hilarious. That's funny. It doesn't make the change with Google. I have to go in there and change it to the new time. Funny. I heard the little outlet click behind me. What is happening? It's only 11. Stupid Google. Well, that's not Google's fault. That's what's the app that controls those plugs? Verisync, I think, is the app that schedules them. The brand of the Wi-Fi plugs I use. I just sort of assumed that it would accommodate daylight savings, but it does not. Did I miss anything here in the chat? Yeah. Yeah, something about the lightly shaded letters has been really appealing to me lately. And it can take some work to control them the way we need to get nicely shaded, like a whole alphabet that matches. It's so easy to shade too big. Especially on a stem shade, because I've been working on making giant stem shades since I started penmanship in general, basically. But having them nice and light so they match the A, that's the key. Ugh, ugly. What happened there? Oops. Ugly bee. Can't even blame that on the shade. That was just my arm decided to hiccup. Too big. See, even that, and that's not even a big shade. It's a nice C, but it doesn't match the A. There's a lot more range of... It's a lot easier to get things to match when we just go big. I find it much more difficult to make them match when we go smaller. It's maybe not big enough, but that's okay. If you're going to do really subtle ones, it becomes a little more important for your hairlines to be really nice. Otherwise, because the contrast is what makes Spencerian and ornamental penmanship and all that look good. And when you make the shades smaller, you're taking away a little bit of that contrast. So to keep the contrast, or to keep there at least some contrast, it's going to be important that you're using a nib that's going to give you decent, or at least nice hairline still. That's a nice E. I'll put a happy face there, just because if I don't, Fozzie will tell me to. See, this F, hotspot. I got a shade right at the very top. Bummer. That's why I'm working on that entry to that stroke. And I started my shade a little too high. I was focused on making it small. Nib snap. When you do, another thing I'll say about lightly shaded capitals, and this is what's been driving me crazy, I want to post a really good alphabet of them. What becomes very apparent, the flaws in the form of a letter are way more apparent, to my eye anyways, when the shade is not big. When the shade is big, I don't know. I guess our eyes tend to forgive some of the perfect form. But when the shades are small, the whole letter kind of has to be perfect. And mine are not perfect, unfortunately. As much as I wish they would be. You'll see a lot of this, like the smaller shaded stuff, in a lot of the older work. Sort of before the shade competitions, the unofficial shade wars began. Where are we? 1, 2, 3. Here. Thank you very much, Lori. Exit stroke turned out nice. The entry stroke is a little wonky. My hand doesn't want to cooperate fully today. Tiny. That's supposed to hit the baseline. Oopsies. I was going to draw a stickman pulling it down, but I won't. Let me try another ball. See if I can do better. Same thing with that P shade on the beginning of the downstroke. Discuss ways of making the minimum T? Do you mean specifically doing the ways of shading it? My tea's empty. I finished it way ahead of schedule, way earlier than I normally do. And it was still cold when I finished it. But I did finish it today, which is rare. Ugh, ugly shape. Let's fix that real quick. It's a little better. Ruined it with that second stroke, but that's okay. Yeah, I think since we started this new feed, Fozzie, you have been... I think you're gonna hear this in a bit, but you're like a few minutes behind, it sounds like. Is the video still behind? For me, it's the normal, it's about 7 seconds is the latency that I experience. And then you guys are usually right sort of behind that. Try to refresh maybe, Fozzie. I could type that. Or can you hear me? No, because the audio would be with the video. Try a refresh. Because I think there's some people in here, like I feel like there's a few people that are chatting with me as I'm working, like normal. But I feel like today there's a couple people that are also really far behind. And Fozzie's one of them. Now, 4 or 5 seconds is normal, but that's Fozzie is like 5 minutes behind. Not 5 minutes, but Fozzie's really far behind. That's true, Fozzie. Fozzie might be the only really far behind one. I don't know. Yeah, I can't tell where exactly everybody is, so everybody post what letter I'm writing right now when you hear me say that. And then we'll get a gauge of where everybody is. Yeah, it sounds like Ashok and Ojaswini are on time with me. You guys are the regular, like my 7 seconds behind from what I am talking. Yeah. So it sounds like everybody, it might just be Fozzie. Happily behind. Mmm, yummy. Finish this quick here. Takes a long time to go through a whole alphabet. Boom! Made the X connection. Booyah! Well, that might have been behind my face, though. Sorry. Let's do the Y over here. I forgot to shade completely. We'll just shade the tail then. How about? Too much hairline there. And the Z. Oh, that's a J. Whoops. Oopsies. Let's try that again, I guess. There we go. Ridiculous. Said. Just for fun. Crazy banana pants. Mm-hmm. Get a new sheet of paper here. Mom had asked for ways to do the lowercase t. I'm assuming meaning shading it. I have a video on this, and I'm making. I know it's been in the works for a long time. What is under here? Something's crunching under my leather. I'll look at that later. Weird. So there's a few ways to make the lowercase t. The way I do it, I feel like is the standard way. I mean, or the most common way is an undercurve that goes to your X height, and then I follow that line, you make a shade, and you pull down. Ideally, basically connecting the two or keeping them in the right line, and then you drop your pen out of there and you connect to get your exit stroke. So it's a 3-stroke letter. You could also, if there's no shade in there, It looks like so, but would be touching. But essentially, you have a lowercase I and then the shade coming down to meet the I. You could, and I used to do this, I don't do it anymore. You could technically get into your T with one stroke. You could do like so. And then the way this sort of works, if I'm doing a shaded T, I could do an undercurve. I'm going to draw this example though, because it's not something I do naturally anymore. You can come up in an undercurve, and then if you think if I don't move over and start my shade like I would here, if I start my shade from this point, my tines are going to spread out. I'm going to come down here, and then I'm going to lift just like I would when I did the first shade. And then when I continue with my exit stroke, you get approximately the same thing. Yes, nice. Yeah, you're way back. So this is one way you can do it. I have never seen it taught this way in books. This is just one way that it can be done. The one way with, if you're gonna continue up all in one stroke in one undercurve, and then add the shade the normal way, what you end up happening or what you end up getting is this type of a stroke or this type of a looking letter where you have all this space in the middle, which you don't want. You only have that space on the ending T. The ending T comes straight down and goes out. So the ending T has more of a taper. The regular T, you want it to hit the X height, like a lowercase I. Oh, am I under? No, I'm under my picture. Okay, good. Another thing you could do, and this is what I did before I started doing movement writing, or what I like doing. When I was going slow, I could change my sort of trajectory. So I would do a regular entry stroke, hit about where the X height is, and then change my traffic to come up. I know that looks really abrupt and weird. Then from there, I would shade and come down and finish my T. I wouldn't do it broken up. That's when I used to write slowly. When I do it quick, I don't like, another way, I'm just thinking of a bunch of potential ways to make the T. You could technically do the downstroke all in one, like so, but I dislike the, it's hard to control this shade when you do that in one stroke like that, which is why traditionally they did it as an entry stroke. The shade, that shade ideally ends higher than this. It ends about the X height, but if it ends on the baseline here, it's not an end of the world. You just go from there and come out. So it's still in 3 strokes. You get a cleaner, sharper taper on that shade. And many of the penmen of the past, like Mataraz was one of them sometimes. It wasn't, who else used to do it? I know Courtney, I feel like, did it eventually sometimes when he was feeling artistic. You get these giant shaded T's. One thing you have to make sure, if you're going to be doing a big shaded T, dip a little bit slower so you don't have quite as much ink on your pen, because you'll potentially get blobs like that on there. If you have less ink, that's less likely to happen, and you'll have a cleaner shade. So when you pull out of the ink, pull out a little bit slower, and you'll have a more controllable amount of ink on the bottom of your nib. I used to shade my T's bigger than I do now. They start to pull focus, and they don't, to me, match the rest of the writing. Specifically, like when you think of other lowercase letters, the letters themselves, like if that's my lowercase n and I want to add a shade to that, that shade, the accent is going to be so tiny that sort of in the realm, that accent is a similar type of accent, maybe slightly bigger than that, but that's sort of the added weight, a comparable amount of attention adding to the T and the D and the P. So I don't do my shades that big anymore. I do more, I guess this is probably the standard size I do them now. Primarily just because, well, they don't add too much weight. And when you also get really big ones, and this is not me saying don't make big shaded T's and D's, it's a total personal preference thing. They look really dope. I'm just saying what I do or don't do anymore. When you make them really big, you get these abrupt, because they're straight lines, right? And as we know, we don't really have many straight lines in ornamental penmanship. So we get these sharp lines, and if the shade is really big, too much ink on there. If my shade is really large, like if I have a shade like that, I get this rather large wedge shape made of straight lines, which can end up looking like it doesn't follow sort of the flow of the alphabet, because it's this weird, it's this shape that's not seen anywhere else in the script. And that's, I mean, as long as it's consistent, if all your T's and D's and P's sort of have that, then that's an accent element and a characteristic element into your writing that will be noticeable, but it can draw focus to that. So you can choose if that's a good thing. Some people would see it as a good thing. Some people would see it as a bad thing. It's up to you. It is technically both. It can be both. The one thing with the T and the D that I haven't talked a ton about that's going to be in my video, I mean, this is essentially my video. What I'm saying now is going through basically everything that's going to be in there, just not quite as in depth, is the difference between a T that has a shape like this. This is an exaggeration because it's really hard to get that, but it has this rounded taper on the way in versus a T that has straight lines. The shade can be the exact same size, but they are two different styles of control on the downstroke. I will try to, let me stir my white ink and I will try to demonstrate both of them. Potentially easier said than done. My own natural writing for many years sort of leaned towards the rounded, tapered variation, which is what ended up coming out of my pen more often. Stir, and I'll show you and explain why I think that was. There's something floating in my ink and I don't know what it is. Is that a bug? No, not a bug. Just a piece of dust or something. Doesn't matter. Okay. So, let me dip slowly so I don't have too much ink. So if you... Actually, show this without... Sorry, scatterbrained. If I make my shade, which as we know, I make my shade at the top, so I have a square. I've talked about this a lot of times. I don't have to go over that, I don't think, because you can see the video on Instagram, and I've talked about it before. I press my nib down, pull down as I push my right tine out. That's standard, no matter, that's how I always do the T, it's always the same, or how I do that shade. Now when I pull, there's the contrast between how much I'm lifting, like releasing pressure, and the speed I'm going. So I can pull and lift so that if I, it's hard to put into words. If I have this shape, it means I pulled relatively quickly as I released relatively quickly as I pulled quickly. That makes sense? So I would say if you do both at the same time, or if you, I guess, release quicker, I don't know. You can get this sort of rounded, tapered shape. Whereas if you release a little slower, what am I gonna say? If you imagine like a bar, a graph, my releasing, when I do this one, it's sort of going, I'm releasing quicker. I don't know how to explain that. Never mind. Pretend I'm not trying to explain that. Doesn't matter. It really overcomplicates the issue anyway, so don't worry about it. Versus this one, where the stroke can be made at the same speed, but this one is likely releasing a little bit quicker, versus this one is pulling more so along the line and releasing vertical a little bit slower. There, that's probably the best way to explain it. So when I do this T, I am releasing pressure more up as I'm pulling down, versus this one, well, I'm not really releasing up as much as I'm pulling down and just releasing the pressure of the tines. That may or may not make sense. Let me try to replicate these actual strokes. I will film this in slow motion when I do my video so that it makes hopefully a lot more sense, because now I'm just rambling. We'll try the tapered one first. Nope. There we go. That's tough to do. But they're quite shorter. So I'm lifting, like I said, I was lifting up quicker. I didn't get much of a taper on these ones, so you're not exactly seeing what I'm trying to demonstrate. But if I were to come back into these and go down, I would have this, like they have a little bit of that taper, versus what I try to get now is more of the even straight line. Same size of shade. Too much ink. That was a really poor example because those all don't have very much taper at all. But, so you can see now, releasing pressure all the way down to that release point, getting a cleaner, straighter line, which is now sort of my goal. I guess that could also be chalked up to the speed of your downstroke. Let me see real quick. I'm going to experimentation mode. If I try to release the exact same, one slower, one faster, versus faster. No, the speed doesn't change it. It's the relation with the speed and the lifting pressure. I've been practicing a lot to get these straighter, cleaner lines. So maybe I've eradicated the habit of getting these rounded ones, but these do happen. I promise you, it's a real thing that I have experienced in the past. Maybe it happens more with iron gall ink because it's a little bit thinner. Maybe the thickness of the white ink is what's making it not happen. I don't know. That's just me completely guessing. No idea. But that's basically how to make the lowercase t. There's always a question. And if we're going on slant line, I'll draw 3 of them. There's always the question of where the shade sits on the slant line. Some people say it sits on the right side. Some people say it sits on the left side. Not many people say that. That one looks weird because it's basically vertical. That's what's wrong with the D in the Moderat's letter. It's more vertical. Some people say it sits right in the middle. Ideally, the middle sounds like it would make most sense. But I don't think so. And this may be an unpopular opinion, but there's reason for it, and allow me to explain it. This is something I haven't gone into detail with a lot. I have in private with people, but never on a video. So I don't think the shade of the T or the D looks best when it's right in the middle, like this, of the flat top T. And the reason for that, let me draw a huge one, and I'll explain to you why. Again, this is sort of now, I'm considering this a practice run for when I film the actual video. If this is my shade, so my middle point is right in the middle of my shade, and I come down to here, and come down to here, this, if I were to look at this at a whole piece of writing, this looks to my eye would look too vertical. And this is, we're splitting hairs. This is getting way more picky than it needs to be. Shade on the right, I think looks better, but that is also too leaned. So you think, well, shade in the middle should be what it should be. Shade in the middle looks too left. It looks too upright. And I'll explain to you why. Because technically, the shade is, this is regular, what people think of when they think shade in the middle, even on both sides here, versus I will say shade in the middle, but it means something different, and let me explain. We'll go the same slant line. Now, if I take off the flat top of my T, I'm going to do this one even bigger so you can see it. So it's totally visible. Oh, itchy leg. Why is my leg itchy? So, if I take off the flat top of the T, my tines are pointing this direction. It is at that point, when we ignore the flat top, that the shade is in the middle. Because if this is tapering down, this is the way to make the shade look like it is the most on your slant line. This is essentially perfect slant line shade. It's pulled down exactly on your 52 or your 48 or whatever slant line you're writing at. Now, so there we go. Shade is in the middle point. Now, if we add a flat top to that, this is why this doesn't work. If I add a flat top to this letter, this continues up, and this line it is not in the middle. This is longer than this. It is slightly more to the right because of the added bit of the flat top shade. So the shade is technically in the middle, but because of the flat top, you can't imagine lining the top of your shade in the middle. The top of your flat top T has to sit, doesn't have to, but to be on slant, it has to sit slightly to the right of the slant line. There. That is the best way that I could describe where the shade goes on a T. And that's regardless of the size of your shade or anything like that. So the key thing to remember, and what makes this easier with ornamental penmanship and specifically with movement writing, is that pull stroke, the way we practice the T, doing that shade and that pull, I'm always going to be pulling down on the slant line because that's what I'm trained to do. Every single time, pulling down on the slant line. Every time, I should never really pull down on a weird angle because everything works on that slant line. So, it comes into point then, if I were to do the entry, like a lowercase I, we imagine following this dotted line up the slant line. I can't spread my tines even. I have to spread my tines so that my pull down is going to be even. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense at all. This is that part made sense, so that's the important part. But I have to spread my tines so there's slightly more on the right side, so that now, when I've now essentially finished this flat top part, I'm now on the pull down part. I can pull straight on my slant line. It's an ugly shade, but it gets the right idea. So it is slightly more on the right side than the left. Fractionally, like, this is, again, getting way too specific with it, but when people always ask me the question, what side should it sit on? And I always say, well, technically a little to the right, but the shade is in the middle. It just is lined up, so it looks like the shade is a little bit on the right because of the flat top T. Makes it asymmetrical. Boom. Knowledge. I don't think my plants have mites. There's one that might. I'll keep an eye out. They're clean though. All right. Yeah, so that is the T. That was a very thorough explanation into flat top T-ness. Teacup? Anyone? Flat top T? Yep, same rule applies for the lowercase p as well. I do my lowercase p slower most of the time. But yeah, as far as where the weight goes, it would sit ever so slightly to the left because of the flat. If we didn't flat bottom the T or the P, it would be right in the middle. But because of the flat bottom, it will end up slightly to the left. But I pull my P a little bit, sounds so weird to say. I do the descender of the P a little bit slower. Like the T we do quite quickly. And you could technically do the P as quick. Oh, sorry. I have trouble controlling my pull stroke like that. Just it gets wavy. I don't feel like I'm in control when I'm doing a pull stroke. In general, with push pulls, my arm doesn't feel super in control like it wants to be. So what I end up doing, I pull down a little bit slower. Not a lot, like there's still movement there, but then I release slow like that. And I'll show you why. And this is just a me thing. This is not something that will happen to everybody, and it's something that I would like to fix because it'd be nice to be able to do it quicker. And it doesn't happen all the time. That was a quick, good one. These are all good ones. Okay, these are all turning out really nice. Again, this might be because of the thickness of the white ink. This might be different with black ink on white paper. Oh, sometimes what happens, the bottom will get this shape that's like, this is an exaggeration of what it looks like. You'll get that kind of a shape on the bottom. It's like a weird foot. When I pull quick, whereas if I go slow, I can get that shade, and I can slowly control the taper out. Similar to how with the T, I slowly enter into that shade, and then I pull quick down. With the P, I go down and slowly draw out that shade, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's like a sock. It's a Christmas stocking. Santa with a heel and a toe. It'll be striped. Now that doesn't look like a sock anymore. But yeah, so that's how I end up doing it, just because it gives me more control, and I'm able to get it to look a little more like I want. I like my little almost abstract teacup. I guess I didn't have to stop there. I could have kept going all the way through. Could I go all the way through into the handle of the teacup? Nope, that looks weird. Where we go? Nope, I'll keep it doing it the way I did it. I like it though. Abstract. I should make a logo for a tea company. I don't know what Pororo is. That's something from your guys's. I haven't been in the past Penmanship in Pajamas videos. Unfortunately, I haven't been remembering to turn them on. Pororo. You are very welcome, Mohammed. It's a penguin character. Like Pingu? Not probably Pingu. I like Pingu. The stop motion clay penguin. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's about where I'm going to end this evening. My arm is tired. I was writing for hours before this, doing that video, and I'm ready to put down the pen. But not because my hands hurt, not because my hands are tired. I'm just worn out. That was a fun explaining that T. I hope that made sense to everybody. That is also likely overcomplicating things. Doesn't have to get that complicated. It would be much easier to just say, yeah, even. But technically, it's not technically even because of that square top. But it's pretty much even. I hope you guys had fun tonight. Sorry for the crazy technical issues. And, oh, is Fozzie in time with us again all of a sudden? I just realized that Fozzie's chatting with us in real time. Something must have happened. Instead of, technically, I was worried I would finish the live, and 5 minutes later, Fozzie would finish and say thank you and goodbye after we were already gone for a bit. But Fozzie caught up, somehow. yeah, hope you guys had a good one. Again, sorry for the crazy technical issues when we got started earlier. Hopefully that never happens again. If you guys have ideas for a theme, I want to do a theme next Tuesday. Not, yeah, I want to do something. We did foiling last week. I want to do something specific. So shoot me ideas. Maybe I'll post a prompt on Instagram stories to see if people have ideas, or drop them in the comments below on this in YouTube video, so we can see what you guys want. Because we could do pretty much anything. All right. Hope you guys have an awesome day, morning, night, whatever time zone you're in. This has been a blast. Thanks for hanging out. Make sure that you're falling in love with the process. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that life should be just a bit of silliness, really. End stream now.